I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting out on the street tonight because we're going to be talking about tents and something that we see in many of our neighborhoods. Homeless campers on the sidewalks, on the streets, in parks, and in natural areas. Back in May of 2020, voters in the metro area passed a tax on couples making $200,000 or more and companies grossing $5 million or more. It's expected to raise roughly $250 million a year for 10 years, totaling $2.5 billion. The money was intended to prevent and reduce homelessness in Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah counties. But now the folks behind People for Portland want voters to tell those governments they must use 75% of that money to set up shelters for the homeless to get them off the streets. Dan Levy on the right and Kevin Looper on the left with the beard are behind the initiative.
This initiative petition will dedicate 75% of the $2.5 billion over the next 10 years to prioritizing shelters, while also protecting funding for the essential services that go along with shelters. And the theory behind it is we need to get people, as a first step towards housing and safety, off the streets and into shelters.
More to the point, it'll fulfill what we said we were going to do 2 years ago when the Metro $2.5 billion homeless services measure passed, which is address the nightly crisis, humanitarian crisis that's unfolding on our streets.
Their initiative, if it gets to the ballot and wins, would redistribute supportive housing services funds. It would require at least 75% go to creating shelters, although it does not say what kind of shelters. It would also keep diverting that money until there were enough beds for every person on the streets and until communities began enforcing their camping bans, which theoretically they would be able to do because there would be somewhere for the homeless person to go. It would also require audits and prohibit conflicts of interest. No one getting paid by the housing services tax could be on an oversight committee. Finally, it would allow any Metro resident to sue the government if they are not enforcing the new law. There's a Texas-like clause in there, right, where you allow individuals to file suit?
Yeah, I mean, any citizen can take action against their government if they don't think the wishes of the measure are being fulfilled.
Here's what we found. It turns out that politicians do what they want to do most of the time. Allowing citizens to sue, and if they sue and win, have government pay their legal fees, is a really good way to get politicians to remember that they're supposed to do the thing we voted for them to do.
Yeah, it only goes into effect, of course, if the voters overwhelmingly pass it. So all we're really talking about is asking elected officials to follow the will of the people that just voted in favor of providing shelters to help people get off the streets.
As you might expect, the idea is not at all popular with the group overseeing the program now. It's called Here Together Oregon, and Angela Martin is the co-director.
The proposed ballot measure would take away 75% of voter-approved funding from homeless solutions, mental health, addiction services, affordable housing, case management, and put it all towards shelter. That is an approach that has failed time and again. It's an approach that would have failed Rebecca, a woman that recently shared the good news with us that she now has a safe place to call home and a new job, thanks to the case management, rent support, and job training that she got through the voter-approved supportive housing services money.
Martin said in the first 6 months, the new tax created 1,600 shelter beds, prevented eviction for 1,400 families, cleaned 1.2 million pounds of trash off the streets, and will provide housing and services for 2,400 families by June of this year.
So we are moving people off the street, and we need to keep doing it.
Kevin Looper knows those arguments well. He helped put together the coalition that passed the tax in the first place. Now he wants to change it.
Way back when, advocates came to me, as a guy who's done a bunch of ballot measures, and said, you know what, we really need money for the social services to get people off the streets. And so we formed a coalition, had 150 groups around the table, and the whole energy was government's not doing enough fast enough to actually address our homeless crisis that's unfolding every night. It's a humanitarian crisis. And I put together that coalition, I named it Here Together. Here Together was an in-joke at the time, because if you say it real slow, it's here to get her. And our whole goal was to get Lynn Peterson, the head of Metro, to refer the measure to voters when she was saying, I don't want to do that. We got her to do it. We passed the measure, and we told everybody who voted on it that we are going to solve the homeless crisis on the streets. And now, many of those same groups are defending the government, doing nothing, or waiting 10 years to do something, if I'm trying to be more fair. And you're going to hear them trying to defend how hard it is and how long it takes.
I asked Angela Martin what would be so bad with getting 25% of all that money while the rest was spent for shelters.
If you ended up with 25% of $250 million, that's still a big number.
But you don't get 25% of that. Again, 5% off the top by ordinance goes towards a tri-county initiative.
And what does that do? That's not helping with mental health or job skills or any of that?
Those dollars are geared at breaking down a lot of the silos that have made past efforts to addressing homelessness a little more difficult.
So
connecting our
bureaucratic
systems.
silos?
Exactly. Connecting so that our health systems, our criminal justice systems, all of those systems that contribute to homelessness, when they release someone from foster care, when they release someone from jail, we need to connect those systems so that a person isn't released from jail into homelessness. And that's what the regional approach is for. So 5% off the top goes for that. 5% off the top for accountability. We need data collection. We need grants management to make sure that the money's being spent properly.
So 10% or $25 million a year is going for the bureaucracy surrounding the issue. I asked Looper about that. You feel like there's been an industrial complex that's grown up around the homeless issue?
I don't feel like it, I know it. I know the people involved, I know exactly what their motivations are, and the central problem we have right now is they don't believe we should be addressing the nightly problem that unfolds on the street.
No,
They really do believe that at the end of the day, we should be talking about building apartment buildings at $400,000 a unit and giving people the keys to them and use the streets as a waiting room for that reform. And it is not okay to leave people on the street every night.
Finally, I took the question to Angela Martin.
But again, not a math major, so I may be wrong in my numbers, but 5% of 5%, that's going to be 10% of $250 million is $25 million to break down silos and just do data collection? It seems like a lot of money.
This problem is we finally have the resources that match the scale of this problem. This proposed ballot measure turns the solutions upside down and puts a disproportionate amount into a temporary solution or a temporary services that don't solve someone's homelessness. It diverts our opportunities that are just now scaling up and will put us in a holding pattern that will actually result in people losing their housing.
This is going to be a battle royale. We'll keep an eye on it, let you know how it goes. Let's move on to a question now about affordable housing. Earlier this week, we had an update on the Metro Housing Bond. By the way, that's different than the tax we were just talking about. This housing bond is in the process of building new affordable housing throughout the metro area. Mary had a question. She asked exactly how many affordable housing units and exactly how much, not a percentage, but how much in real dollars. Well, the first one is an easy one to answer, Mary. The goal is to build 3,900 units of affordable housing. A little more than half, 1,950, would be family-sized, so more than 2 bedrooms, and 1,600 would be considered deeply affordable. We'll explain that one in a minute. So here's where it does get a little bit tricky, so stay with me, Mary. And a lot of you want to know, what does that mean in dollars? Well, it depends on the size of your household. For example, if you're single, the only person in your household, you would qualify for affordable housing under this bond if you're making less than $40,000 a year. That means your maximum rent would be about $1,015. But if you're single and making less than $20,000 a year, you qualify for deeply affordable housing, and your rent would be about $507 a month. Now, let's say your household is bigger. You have kids, a partner, family, that sort of thing to take care of. With 5 people in your household, you'd have to make less than about $62,000 to qualify for that affordable housing, and your rent would top out around $1,800. Split that number in half for deeply affordable housing, and your rent would be just over $1,000. There's more to the process, so if you need help or you have questions about affordable housing, there's fortunately an easy number to call. You can dial 211, and the experts there can walk you through everything you need to know about income and rent limits and the housing that might be available. But right now, Remember, there's still a severe shortage of affordable housing in our area. And since it's Friday, I think we all deserve to have a little bit of fun. We just got your meat and potatoes at the top of the show. Now, how about some dessert? All of us in the Pacific Northwest know there are some very difficult names to pronounce in this area, and we do see your emails if one of us gets it wrong on the air. But come on, it can be pretty difficult for some of the newcomers to learn how to say everything right. Tonight, we're going to clear up some of the confusion, and we're going to start with the tricky names in the great state of Washington. Here's Jim Denver.
From Spokane to Yakima, visitors have been known to botch the names of some Washington places. But even longtime Northwesterners can stumble over the occasional Enitai, Chowila, or Wakayakum. So we asked the residents themselves to help us get it right.
Welcome to my town, Squim.
Realtor Dan Erickson is happy to see you. Just leave your unnecessary E sound at home.
A lot of people call it Sequim. They're from out of town.
The state's most northeastern county,
Pend Oreille,
is a place people have had trouble saying and spelling for more than a century.
we'll see a D inserted, we'll see apostrophes inserted.
Sue Morrow from the Pend Oreille County Historical Museum says the French name may have described a local tribe's jewelry.
The most common you'll hear is ear pendant.
From Snohomish to Swinomish, keep your accent on the right syllable. And remember, not every name sounds the way it looks. Just ask the residents of Hold on.
It is Eneas Valley.
Yeah, that. As the owner of the Eneas Valley Country Store, Rose Eisler has heard it all. So I'm sure there are some people who get it wrong from time to time.
Most times, actually.
Rose would like to leave the most common mispronunciation,
Eneas Valley.
behind.
When we answer the phone at the store, we just say country store.
Your Spanish may be bueno, but the name of this town is Buena. There's cheese in Nat Cheese, but no coal in Colville. And as for the King County city named after Iowa's state capital, S or no S?
No S.
That's right. Mayor Matt Mahoney says it's pronounced Des Moines with no Z at the end. He also says half the town's residents will disagree.
It's split. It is split. Whichever circle we're in, we'll add the S or take it off, to avoid conflict. I think the translation of it's more important. It means the greatest place to live in Washington State. And that comes directly from the mayor.
However you pronounce the place where you live, we hope you're happy to call it home.
It's beautiful.
It's a great place.
It's like swim with a Q. Squim.
Oh, that's fun. Well, there's a bunch of those names here in Oregon. We're going to pick through some of those, and we're going to clear up how they're supposed to be said. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to send us your suggestions on the really hard to pronounce names that are always butchered, and we'll take a look at those, okay? You can email the story, thestory@kgw.com, or you can leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Since we're talking about names, let's talk about what's behind the name of one of Portland's neighborhoods, the Alphabet District. City founders named streets in Northwest Portland a pretty simple way, by using the alphabet. Let's have Devin Haskins explain what's in a name.
I could save you guys the rest of the alphabet and really not sing for you. So let's back up a couple letters to the letter C, as in Cooch. John Hurd Cooch, to be more specific.
I call him sort of the granddaddy.
Say that again?
Granddaddy, because he really was the granddaddy.
That's Northwest Portland resident Harvey Klein. He wrote this book about the names behind the streets in the Alphabet and Pearl districts.
And I realized that there wasn't a real compact book that told this story.
The district's name references the lettered streets in alphabetical order. A Street, B Street, and you get the idea. Cooch came from the East Coast, settling in Northwest Portland. After he died, Portland began to expand, annexing the cities of Albina and East Portland in the late 1800s. Those lettered streets were changed to names of prominent people. As far as the granddaddy himself, some of those names tie back to those related to Cooch. Gleason and Wilson, both doctors, married two of his daughters. Flanders, a captain, was his brother-in-law.
Cooch really did, let's call it, populate or father this entire district for many, many years.
The Alphabet District's boundary stretches from Burnside to the south to Vaughan to the north, meaning it doesn't include a few letters. So next time when you sing with me, we'll sing Portland's Alphabet District's version and just leave out those letters.
They don't know their ABCs.
And that's what's in a name.
I love that, Devin. I've been here 32 years. I had no idea about some of that stuff. There's some debate about exactly where the northern boundary is. Some argue it's Vaughan, others say it's York. Either way, it's still missing a few letters. By the way, if you want to check out that book Devin mentioned, you can find it at Powell's.
The leadership in Oregon's legislature looks a lot different than it did just a year ago in both parties. So after famously not getting along and one side resorting to walkouts, does this mean Democrats and Republicans will have a better relationship in Salem?
I do think that there is genuineness to work across the aisle and to have better conversations.
Or this could just be the honeymoon period, when the story continues.
Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. We've seen them coming in already. Or give us a call. Leave us a voicemail at 503-226-5090. By the way, let us know what you think of that initiative that we profiled at the top of the show. Would you support that? You think it's a bad idea? Why? Let us know. Oh, by the way, I also want to correct something I said last night about the primary election in May. Scott and more than a few of you pointed out I got it totally wrong when I said that you will not be able to vote if you're non-affiliated. Sorry about that. That was not correct. You will still get a ballot and you will be able to vote on nonpartisan things like the city or county commissioners, judges, school boards, maybe tax or policy measures. So sorry about that. I blew that one. Be sure to watch for your ballot as we get closer to the May primary, and for goodness sake, vote. Now, we have some new leadership in Salem. Both leaders of the Democrats and the Republicans have stepped down from the state legislature. They're working on their campaigns for governor. So this past short session was a chance for the new leaders to see if they can work together. They did actually get a lot done. They passed more than 130 bills and they spent $2.5 billion. And hey, no walkouts this time. No one got mad, decided to take all their toys and go home. That is a big departure from the past few years. This week on Straight Talk, Laurel Porter asked the Republican leadership about what was different this time. No one walked out to stop progress, even though lawmakers disagreed on big issues like the farm workers' overtime bill. House Republican leader Representative Vicki Breese Iverson said there was no need to use that tactic this time.
When we experienced a walkout the last time, we walked out for a specific issue. And we in fact were able to stop that issue during that short session. 2 weeks after we came back from the sine die date of that session, the governor put an executive order into play that in essence created the very issue that we walked out over. And what is in front of us with this ag overtime conversation is that should we have walked out, Boley was already starting plans to enact what would be the new regulations or laws for this industry.
The new House Speaker, Democrat Dan Rayfield, told us earlier in the month that working with Breese Iverson was wonderful. And she said she is optimistic about the future.
Representative Breese Iverson, do you agree with Speaker Rayfield's assessment? And could this signal a new spirit of cooperation?
I would 100% agree that my experience with Speaker Rayfield was vastly different than my experience with his predecessor. I do think that there is genuineness to work across the aisle and to have better conversations at all. And I appreciate that. I appreciated the open access that I had in trying to get through short session with Speaker Rayfield. And I do look forward to having a better conversation as we move forward.
The Oregon Republicans, by the way, also talked with Laurel about the historic all-women leadership team for Republicans in the House and who they want to see win the Republican nomination for governor. You can watch Straight Talk tonight at 7 o'clock or on our KGW YouTube page. Still ahead, we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics, the Charter Review Committee. It's a name that I think sounds super boring, and it probably makes you want to change the channel. But wait, if you think Portland's government is not working well, then you're going to want to stick around. Pay attention to see how they're going to try and change it. That's coming up next. We talk about this a lot because we hear from you about it a lot. Portland's form of government not working so well. We've gotten a lot of calls over the past few months from people saying, let's just throw the whole thing out the window and start from scratch. In fact, I'm not sure that we've had even one that said, things are great, don't change anything. So now we're getting a better idea of how the city government might change after this fall's election. The Charter Commission, that's the group working to rebuild the government from the ground up, agreed on a new proposal for how to structure the city government in Portland. And if you live in the city, you get to vote on the change this November. You can take a look right now. Here's the idea. First, the new plan would take the city commissioners off of bureau duty. Right now, each commissioner spends a lot of time managing the city's bureaus, and it makes it hard to get anything else done, like, well, fixing homelessness or gun violence or even cleaning up the trash. The bureaus don't work well together. They have separate budgets. It creates government silos and a huge bureaucratic mess for everyone. Here's the chair of the Charter Commission.
Often bureaus aren't communicating with each other very well. And if a person needs to have something done in the city, they might have to go from one bureau to the next trying to figure out how to do things. If you're building a house, you might have to get permits from 8 different bureaus. If you are dealing with trash, sometimes there's multiple bureaus that deal with trash and waste management. So it's just very confusing to people, and they don't often know where to go. And then sometimes the bureaus just aren't coordinating amongst themselves. So you might have one bureau with the requirement to do a certain thing and another bureau with the requirement that actually conflicts with it, but it's left up to the individual Portlander to try to sort it out. And it's not coordinated. It's not, operated in a way that is efficient and makes a good use of our taxpayer dollars.
Wow, I'm ready to vote. Under the new proposed government, bureau management would go to the mayor and a new city manager, while the city councilors would be freed up to work on big picture stuff. Speaking of city councilors, we'd get more, a lot more. They'd have to come from specific areas around the city. Right now, they can live anywhere. The commission proposes splitting the city into 4 geographic districts based on population. Each district would elect not 1, not 2, wait for it, 3 councilors for a total of 12 for the entire city. So there's a lot to think about, and we're going to get into this next week. We're going to take a closer look at the changes, what they mean, and when they would actually start if they pass. In the meantime, we'd like to know what questions you have, and we want to get those from you, and then we'll start looking into them. So what do you want to know about the proposal? You can leave us an email or a voicemail, and we'll look into those for the big story next week. When we come back, we'll take a look at how you can take a bite out of homelessness in our own area. You know, I may have said take a bite out of homelessness. I meant hunger, and you can do that with our Hey Help campaign. We're asking you to donate to the KGW Great Food Drive. It's the last day to give. So far, we've provided about 2 million meals. Your donations go far at the Oregon Food Bank. $10 means 30 meals. The quickest and easiest way to give today is online at kgw.com/food drive. And all this week, Pacific Office Automation will match the first $10,000 donated. We want to thank Pacific Office Automation, local Toyota dealers, Rivermark Community Credit Union, and Safeway for supporting this year's food drive. It's Friday, a perfect time to remember that there's lots of people with lots of good things going on with them. Here's a comment we got recently in Vancouver on the waterfront when we asked people at random, what's your good news?
Well, I just recently moved to Vancouver and I'm really enjoying it, especially today. It's a very beautiful sunny day and I really love waterfront.
It is beautiful there. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. Remember, the story, our story, that never ends. Have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.
This is KGW News.